Still, the last gassing in U.S. history would take place more than 50 years after the end of World War II. Ironically, two American brothers, who were also German nationals, Karl and Walter Legrand, had been sentenced to death. Karl Legrand chose lethal injection, but Walter chose to die by lethal gas, hoping that that method would be overturned by the courts. He was wrong. He died in Arizona's gas chamber on March 3rd, 1999. Gassing is no longer used in part because a federal district court found it to be cruel and unusual punishment based on the fact that death by gas could be much more protracted and painful than officials had previously claimed. The replacement for gassing was lethal injection, a supposedly new and more humane method that had originated from, of all sources, the Nazis. Today, a few of the old gas chambers have been consigned to museums or used as ghoulish tourist attractions, but most were simply converted to become death chambers for intravenous killings. While making my documentary last year, our crew found the original chair that had been used in Nevada's historic gas chamber executions. When the death chamber was renovated, it seems, a prison guard took home the chair as a souvenir. He put on a new coat of paint and used the chair at his dining room table for years. But when he offered to bequeath it to his son, the younger man was horrified, and it ended up in a museum, which is where we found it. We came across Guy John's unmarked grave behind the prison wall, among the rocky dirt and sagebrush, a reminder of one of the thornier milestones in America's and the world's execution history. From that Nevada desert, I picked up a smooth stone that I later left along the train track leading into Auschwitz-Birkenau. Thank you. That's it. I know it's a really rough thing to talk about, but that's why I'm here with you tonight, to have some discussion with you. Any reaction to things that I've said, things that you wonder about, things that you want to bring up, I would very much welcome hearing from you.
We will be doing a Q&A at this mic. We'd like to ask everyone to make sure that you do please speak into the microphone so we have it for our audio recording. Scott will also be selling his books after we are done with the Q&A.
That was very moving, and I had a question about Kijan. What was his crime, first of all? And secondly, I don't think it was coincidental that those chosen to be executed by gas were a Mexican and two Chinese Americans. Mm-hmm. Can you speak about who was chosen to die in such a fashion, and maybe connect it to some of the reasons why maybe you chose to write a book today about these issues and our current situation with the death penalty and who ends up in prison and who ends up dying and being executed.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that up. First of all, going back to Guy John, who was the first person executed by lethal gas, and one of the very, very few Chinese Americans in our history to be put to death by the death penalty. It's important to understand that Guy John was a member of a Tong, a group, a Chinese group in San Francisco, self-support group, some would say a gang, but it was a social club that existed in San Francisco at that time. And in Nevada, which had had a history of Chinese working for the railroads and doing other things over the years in mining, Guy John and a friend named Yui Singh were arrested for the murder of an elderly Chinese man in a tiny, tiny, sort of an abandoned town named Mina in Nevada. And they were accused of murdering him because he wouldn't pay a debt. At that time, in Nevada, there was a great deal of anti-Chinese feeling. It was rampant through the United States. There was the thing called the yellow peril that was being bandied about. Those interviews for TV, I was used as a consultant to talk about the death penalty generally, and they said, talk about the gas chamber too. So I had to bone up on that a bit to understand more about it. And I became more interested in it and ultimately decided, because nobody else had ventured into it, that I would do something. During the process of doing the book, and I tend to work on a number of books at once, actually. And remember, I was the guy that was back here a while ago talking about another book. That's the same guy. Anyway, I also decided that it would be very interesting to try to do a companion film. And I hooked up with a German investigative reporter, a leading investigative reporter, filmmaker in German TV. And we collaborated on a film, getting into the German side of it, the German archives and such, as well as the English language sources. We went around to all of the archives. And I have to say that it was a very interesting experience, because I believe, compared to American TV journalists, the European documentary people are much more serious, much more rigorous. If you're going to say something, you've got to have the evidence in hand. You have to go get the primary sources. You have to go to that place that you were mentioning. You have to study it. They don't mess around. If you don't have it, you can't deal with it. So there was a lot that I learned from that process. And some of it made its way into the book as I was finishing it. So it's been in the last couple of years, has been an intense thing that I worked on. In fact, I also did another book, which came out even more recently than this one, about lethal gas. And not just the experience of the gas chamber, but many other ways in which lethal gas used in chemical warfare. We see something like the BP oil disaster, and we don't realize that there's a lot of gas that is coming up from that. We don't realize that we've had extinctions of life on Earth, at least 5 probably in the past, all of which the agent of destruction, according to most scientists, has been gases. So there's a lot to this gas thing as far as I'm concerned. Global warming, many, many aspects to it, as well as man-made gases, all the poisons that we have choking us all the time. So I don't know if that gives you what you were after, but that's a little bit of that.
Sorry, I did come in late. I have a statement and I do have a question. There is hope. Like 16 years ago, we voted a governor out of office because he didn't believe in the death penalty. And it hasn't come up, I don't think, in any political campaigns in New York in quite some time. But anyway, what was the picture of the woman with the mask on her face and in the gas chamber? I didn't get that.
There was a movie, 1958, called I Want to Live. A great American film, black and white. Looked like a documentary film, but it was not. It was a feature film, and by a great director with a great cast that won a number of Academy Awards. It was actually filmed in a absolutely precise replica of the San Quentin death chamber, and there was a very, very detailed presentation of the whole execution process involving the gas chamber. So it's one of the most useful and most detailed sources available about the use of the gas chamber. There are some very few other films that deal with it, and there are some famous films that had very, very famous, a very famous concluding scene that was actually cut out of the film because it was considered to be too sensitive for American audiences at the end of the war, bringing up the fact that we had the gas chamber here. So Hollywood cut it out. As far as this governor thing goes, I went to work for Cuomo because he was against capital punishment. I worked for him and his administration for 12 years, and I resigned in protest over Pataki's policies on capital punishment and other horrible policies. And now we have a somewhat different landscape here in New York. We have the younger Cuomo. We have a number of state officials who are seemingly against capital punishment. But as I indicated when I talked about Germany and I talked about this country, that can change in a flash. We also have to keep in mind that we have the New York State death penalty and we have the federal death penalty, such as what was done to Timothy McVeigh and a few others. And that's been so vastly expanded and could be more expanded that we have to keep in mind that that also is out there, so that in reality we still have the death penalty in New York because we have the federal death penalty. So we can't be complacent. Huh? You know, we still have a public that says they favor it, although actually that's a very soft level of support for a lot of those people. When pressed, they say they go for life without parole. But we have now a resentment and a discontent building in society, a need for scapegoats and things of that sort. And we have to keep that in mind. We have to remember history.